Hi, I did my author study on Gary Paulsen. Many of you probably know who he is. He's written numerous children's books. Um, he was born in 1939 in Minnesota, and he had a very tumultuous childhood. His parents were alcoholics, and he was moved around from family member to family member. By his own account, he was a terrible student. He flunked ninth grade and had to repeat it, and he barely graduated high school with a D-minus average. Still, somehow, he learned to love reading, and he went on to become a beloved author. The first book of his that I read was Hatchet. My oldest brother recommended it to me because it was the book that changed him from a kid who hated reading to a kid who loved reading. It's about a boy named Brian whose parents are divorced, and he's flying in a small plane to go spend the summer with his dad when the pilot has a heart attack and they crash into a pond in the Canadian wilderness. And Brian has to survive on his own using his hatchet. It was a very exciting book for me to read as an elementary school student, and I pretty much devoured every Gary Paulsen book I could get my hands on after that. Now, my fourth grade teacher read another Gary Paulsen book to our class out loud, and it, to this day, is one of my favorites, and it's become one of my kids' favorites, too. The book is Harris and Me, published in 1993. It does contain some language and content that would require careful consideration and explanation, and you would probably want to bring parents in on that, too. Each chapter starts with a little summary, and this chapter 10, starts with, "In which I discover love only to have my heart broken, and in revenge I fry Harris's business." So we're going to skip to the frying Harris's business part. "I ain't gonna do it." Harris stood by the side of the barn, looking at the wire that came from an insulator near the door and led out into the pasture. Newt had turned the pigs out into a part of the cow pasture to root and dig for a while. Rather than put up hog fence, he bought a battery-operated electric fencer and some insulators and wire. Inside the barn, he put a dry cell 6-volt battery and the fencer to keep them out of the weather, then brought the wire out through a hole. We had half a good day watching the sows figure out the wire. They learned fast, and one of them, old Gertie, learned on the first day to cake mud on her head, let it dry, and then push the wire with the dry mud insulator to get out of the pasture and into the cornfield. The chickens hit it a few times, squawking and jumping, with feathers flying, and even Buzzer, the pet lynx that lives with them, accidentally brushed the wire. When it popped him, he took it as an attack and went after it, which of course made it worse and made him more angry, so that he attacked it harder, biting and clawing at the wire until finally he admitted defeat and walked away from the fence. Every hair on his body was straight out, and I believed if anybody had crossed him right then, he would have killed. It was while Buzzer was fighting the wire that the idea came. We had tried touching it with the backs of our fingers and pieces of grass, but the results were inconclusive. I had always been of a scientific nature, believed in the worth of experiments, and I wondered what would happen, watching Buzzer and the fence at war, if somebody actually peed on the wire. Specifically, I wondered what would happen if Harris peed on the wire. I knew it would not be an easy experiment to conduct, and set about doing it carefully. The subject would be reluctant, downright negative as it turned out, and there would have to be some form of inducement so attractive that it would overcome the reluctance. As it happened, I had the Doherty pictures. The power of these pictures to control and induce was beyond question. I believe if given enough of them, Harris would have walked into a bonfire. Indeed, I would have done the same thing. The quality of the pictures wasn't great. They were black and white and small and grainy, but they worked. It was impossible to look at them and still breathe correctly. My dilemma was mostly one of quantity. I knew I could get the experiment to work, but with how much effort? How many pictures would it take? I had altogether 7 of them, and since I was interested in them myself, purely from an artistic viewpoint, of course, I didn't want to completely deplete the collection. I offered Harris one picture. It was not the best picture. The best picture I wouldn't have released if Harris had bitten the wire and hung on it with his mouth, something I considered suggesting when I remembered what he had done with the first love of my life. But it was a good picture, accurate in detail, fundamentally sound as far as composition and educational benefits were concerned, and far-reaching in its ability to promote advanced stages of hyperventilation. Nope, he repeated, I ain't gonna do it. But his refusal was soft. I could sense the weakness in it, and I countered. The picture I had offered, plus one other, the one where it was possible to see it all. Well, I had him. First, the rules. What rules? You have to pee right on the wire, not just pass over it, and you have to pee on it long enough to get the surge. It was a pulse fencer, not on continuously, but pulsing at 1 second intervals. Otherwise, it's not a deal. He thought another minute, studying the wire. That thing put a sow on her knees. I shook my head. She was off balance. Besides, 2 of the pictures were your very own. That's a good swap. Yet another minute, then a sigh. All right, go get the pictures. I ran to the house, took out the 2 selected pictures, then put them under my shirt and trotted back to the barn where Harris was still standing, looking at the wire. I've got them. Let me see. I raised my shirt and showed him the pictures, lowered it. So go ahead, pee on it. He unbuttoned the fly on his bibs and took his business out, then stood there frowning. What's the matter? It don't work. Nothing's coming out. Push a little. I am. It's scared. It don't want to do it. If you don't pee on the wire, the deal's off. I reminded him, thinking it would prompt action. I know. It just won't work. His frown deepened. It's like it knows what's coming and don't want to do it. 2 pictures. I'll have to lie to it. Lie to what? My business. I'll just have to lie to it and start peeing over here, then swing it around, make the dumb thing think everything is all right. He turned sideways, aimed away from the fence, and in a moment it started. So turn, I said, before it's done. It ain't that easy. Something in me won't let it happen. Ah, heck, you're gonna run out. No, I'm holding her back. Here now. He turned slowly until the stream of urine was only inches away from the wire, hung there for a second, then hit the wire. There, he said. Now are you happy? He had crossed the wire between pulses when the electricity wasn't moving through the wire, and the pulse hit him halfway through the word happy. Later I would come to know a great deal about electrical things. I would understand that water is an excellent conductor of electrical energy, but that urine with its higher mineral content is even better. What Harris did amounted to hooking a copper wire from this business to the electric fence. The results were immediate and everything I would have hoped for from the standpoint of scientific observation, not to mention revenge. In a massive galvanic reaction, every muscle in Harris's body convulsively contracted, jerking like a giant spring had tightened him inside. He went stiff as a poker, then soared up and over backward in a complete flip, arcing a stream that caught the afternoon sun, so I swore I could see a rainbow in it. Nor did the spectacle end when he hit the ground. He landed on his side, both legs pumping, then sprung to his feet, running in tight circles, holding himself and hissing, "Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh." So, everything Harris and the narrator do in the book would be what is considered type 2 fun. Stuff that is not fun while you're doing it, but when you retell it, it's hilarious. Gary Paulsen drew on his own childhood to write stories like this and many of his other stories. He's an excellent author, a great option if you want to get especially young boys interested in reading, boys who claim that they don't like to read, but maybe it's just because they can't relate to what they're reading. So an activity that I would do with this is to have students pair up and talk with each other about their most interesting, their funniest, or their wildest type 2 fun experience. And they'll decide between the 2 of them which one's the best, and they'll come up with a skit that they will narrate and act out. Hopefully they'll be hilarious like this one, and the students can have a lot of fun, learning to tell stories like Gary Paulsen does. Thank you very much.